This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. I am Chris Graham. It's Thursday, so Jeff Fife is in studio with me here. We're going to talk some UVA basketball, UVA sports, probably some pro wrestling towards the end. Jeff, welcome.
Wahoo-wah. Thank you. It's the spoiled Wahoo fans edition of Street Knowledge. I found it fascinating watching that game yesterday, and as Chris mentioned, it's Thursday. We record this the day after the Virginia Cavaliers clinch the ACC #1 seed with 3 games left to go in the tournament. They win by double digits against an ACC opponent, and every Wahoo fan I've talked to is disappointed. When did we get to the stage when the beginning of the season we're unranked and the expectations weren't what they are now, and now we win by double digits to secure ACC #1 seed, and there's grumbling in Wahoo Nation? Are we too spoiled as a fan base?
Yeah, and that even dates back to the first season of this modern great era of UVA basketball, 2013-2014. I think it's a little bit of spoiled and a little bit of I don't know if, I guess it's the opposite of spoiled, because I think that UVA fans are still thinking that the bubble's going to burst at some point, and they're just waiting for that to happen. And so if we only beat Georgia Tech by 11, that's the sign that it's about to all come crashing down. You think back to that 2013-2014 season and that long winning streak that led to that ACC, that first of 3 in the last 5 years regular season titles in the ACC. And people were just waiting. We've won 12 straight, but that next one we're going to lose. And so, yeah, I still think that there's a little bit of that UVA fan self-loathing. You're a Red Sox fan. You know what that's like. You feel like 86 years between World Series. Yeah. I think that UVA fans. It's a fan base that will, whenever they talk to their friends who are Hokies, oh yeah, our program's won 25 national championships, but soccer and lacrosse and baseball. I mean, sports, but desperately wants one of the major two. And it's not going to happen in football, but basketball it seems like, back in the 80s, we had Ralph Sampson, felt like we were this close, and now with Tony Bennett and his and this #1 team, feels like you're this close. So yeah, you're #1, you win by 11 at home against a team that played its butt off to keep it close for a long time, and you feel underwhelmed. That's interesting.
Pastor at the beginning in the press conference leading to the game said we have to play perfect game to beat the Wahoos. And after the first half, I looked at those stats and went, he's getting a perfect game. I mean, they were shooting 50% from the floor, from 3. I can't remember what the final stats ended up, but in that first half, I think they're minimal turnovers. May have had 1 less rebound than we did. The only place we were beating them on the stat sheet was the free throws made. They did have
only by a couple.
Yeah, they did have a perfect game plan, and I like the fact that a team can have a perfect game against us and still lose. I like the fact that the last time we were on that home floor, we could allow a 0-17 run and still push it into overtime. But that being said, we seem to be playing better as a team that was searching for #1 that has now owned the #1 ranking. Any thoughts or observations on the difference that we've seen from the Wahoos as we climb the ladder to when we got to the top rung?
Well, I'd say, the top rung was climbed before the Miami game, and that 9-point win at Miami was impressive. Don't sneeze on that one. Miami's going to be an NCAA tournament team. You won on their floor by 9 points with a team with tired legs. Last night, Georgia Tech played a perfect game for 31 minutes. 9:11 to go. It's still a 4-point game. Devin Hall hits 2 free throws. At that stage, the score's 51-45. Georgia Tech has 45 points on 43 possessions. They're scoring more than a point per possession against a team that gives up .839 points per possession on a season. They're shooting 18 of 36, still 50% at that stage. They're still losing by 6 points. And so, they go 4 of 15 down the stretch. They only scored 9 points the rest of the way on, I think it was 15 possessions. And so, Virginia does what it needs to do in those last 9 minutes and puts away a team that played a perfect game. You look at now, this is a fear I've got. I wrote a column about this, and Scott and I addressed this on our post-game Facebook Live podcast. The only concern I've got coming out of that game is We talked after the Virginia Tech game. Did Virginia Tech give a blueprint to future opponents on how to stop Virginia offensively? They packed the zone in the lane, dared Virginia to shoot threes. Virginia shot threes, didn't make them. That's fixable, and we've seen it since then. Virginia's been attacking really well since then. So you can attack the lane and kick out for threes, or attack the lane, get some baskets. Last night our bigs were 10 of 13 from the floor, so that's fine. What the blueprint that I'm afraid of after last night is, now not a lot of teams have a guy like Ben Lammers, who's a senior, who's 6'11", who's a good passer, and had 22 points last night. But really they ran their whole offense through him like a traditional center, like teams used to run through a center back in the 70s and 80s. But they used him in the high post. So the ball was thrown to him between the foul line and the three-point line. And if you think about it, and you watched the game last night, they'd pass the ball to him in the high post, and then a guard would cut to the lane right behind him, almost right off him, rub off him. He'd either pass the ball to him, or if Virginia cheated off him, then he had that little pick-and-pop 12 to 15-footer wide open. If both those options went away, he would dribble handoff to a guard cutting around him, and then he would roll straight to the rim. There were three options off that play, and then a fourth one even would develop, because if Virginia would cut down and try to take away that dive to the rim, then theoretically someone else was open for a dive coming from the perimeter. That offense worked great last night for 31 minutes. Virginia figured it out in the last 9 minutes. But what I wrote in my post-game column was, Georgia Tech has Georgia Tech's players. They have Ben Lammers, but they don't have anybody around him. A team that you play in March, well, if they have a guy that can run it like Ben Lammers runs it, the high post offense like Ben Lammers could run it last night, a team that gets to March probably has better players around that guy too. So that is something that Virginia will have to work on. Clemson ran that similar offense well for about 15 minutes in the game in Charlottesville. The last 25 minutes didn't run it so well. But we've seen that kind of offensive approach, the high post screen off that, work well. That's something that Tony has to now obviously work on. I think Georgia Tech looked at what Clemson did for 15 minutes and say, maybe we can do the same thing. It's the only chance we got. And it kind of worked. So, and I think part of last night, too, the game being closer, Tony Bennett was trying to manage minutes for his starters. He was trying to get more minutes out of bench guys. Nigel Johnson got some more minutes. Diakite got more minutes. They played well in those minutes. But, I think there's some alchemy kind of changes going on right now, too. That maybe kept that game a little closer. Also, 8 days of rust. There's some rust involved there, too.
Our first offensive set, the ball goes into Wilkins. And from my vantage point, it looked like he had a direct line of sight to the basket. And he dumps to Salt.
Yeah.
He hasn't seemed to be as aggressive these last couple games offensively, and even allowed somebody to beat him on the baseline. But, that'll happen on occasion. Is Wilkins okay? Are you hearing anything? I mean, he had limited minutes.
He played 25 last night, which is not normal for him. Now, he played 39 against Virginia Tech. He's been dealing with an issue, and it's probably going to be an issue the rest of the season. In the NC State home game, which was the 5th ACC game, so we're now 15 games in, so 10 games ago, he fell early in the second half of that game, fell kind of hard, and he apparently bruised his butt. Extreme lower back, bruised butt. He left that game in the second half with about 17 minutes to go, didn't come back. Virginia didn't need him. They won the game by 18 points against a team tied for 4th in the ACC right now. And so he's been nursing that since, and he's not really been the same Isaiah Wilkins since. I mean, he's still the top-rated defensive player in the country, top-rated defensive player ACC, all that kind of stuff. But it's affected his mobility a little bit. And I think it's affected his explosion, and that's why you see last night a play where he could, theoretically, he's got a lane, go up and throw it down, young man. You're 6'8". He is deferring a bit more. It's also affected his jump shot. Think about that Duke game. When Duke went zone, Wilkins has been the guy the last couple of years that stands in the middle of that zone and either passes the ball well out of it if they crunch on him or hits that little jumper when they don't. And he's not the Duke game. He missed 4 shots, missed them badly. DeAndre Hunter replaced him, and really Wilkins didn't play the rest of that game because he was not effective. So I think that butt issue, the bruised butt issue, could be something that is limiting him a bit, but still, defensively he's the same. But yeah, you noticed it. Offensively, he's not the same guy.
And interesting, we may have seen and Mamadi getting more minutes in Isaiah's, and that could be intentional, as you've referenced before, with Bennett's plan to get some of these bench players some minutes and get them ready and get his starters rested. I think the best footwork and finish around the basket I saw from Mamadi in the post, with a little fake, drop step, very soft, right-hand hook, high arcing, got well above the rim just on that shot, 5-6 feet out. That was a textbook center move of beauty.
Yeah.
And he followed that with some very aggressive play in the post. Is this the Mamadi coming out party?
We hope. I mean, we have to say we hope so, because he's still a guy who gets in foul trouble. He'd play more minutes if he didn't get in foul trouble. Even last night he had 3 fouls. He had another move on a secondary break. He got a pass from, I want to say it was from Wilkins, and went strong to the basket and ended up doing a finger roll layup, but it was a very strong move. The move you referenced, actually, what Georgia Tech was doing well and Virginia didn't figure out very well in the first half, they did in the second half, was they were switching on all screens. And so what a couple times you saw early in the second half, Virginia recognized it, the guards recognized it, and then they just overthrew the guy in the post with a guard on his back. But Diakite twice backed his guard in after those switches and made them pay for that. But he's got to stay out of foul trouble. His issue is, he last night his offensive rating was 145, second on the team to Ty Jerome, who had 18 points, 15 in the second half. But Diakite, you look at his foul numbers. He had 4 in the win at Miami, limited his minutes in that game. He just had 7 minutes there. He didn't have a foul in the Tech game, but. And I'm saying he has foul issues. I've seen a couple 4-foul games early in the ACC season. Actually, the foul issue isn't as much as I thought it was. But when you see that he doesn't get fouls, Jeff and I right now are both looking at a stat sheet for just Diakite. He got 21 minutes against Syracuse, no fouls. So the more he can stay out of foul trouble, the more he'll stay on the floor, and the more effective that makes Virginia, especially last night when you're able to get more minutes out of DeAndre Hunter. And I think we probably want to talk about him too.
Yeah, I mean, he was the Energizer Rabbit for the Cavaliers. I mean, the crowd was quiet. We were all expecting to see the bench unloaded. We wanted to see the Jay Huff show in the second half. And then Mamadi, I kept thinking to myself, all right, who's going to be, and I thought it is going to be Hunter, who's going to be the one that energizes this crowd? Is it going to be a Wilkins block or a dive for a loose ball? Is it going to be a Ty Jerome 26'3"? What's going to make it happen? And it turns to be Mamadi playing very aggressively in the post and defensively. I mean, he got called on a goaltending shortly after some of his offensive plays that was just, it could have been, probably was goaltending, but holy cow.
It was too impressive. It was too impressive. Yeah.
It's like Mamadi has got the Justin Anderson in him where you just go, ooh, ah. And I don't think we've scratched the surface on what he can do. And he's, sophomore this year? We've got 2 more years.
Yeah, he's a redshirt. He's a sophomore who entered UVA as what would have been, he basically forewent his senior year of high school to enroll at UVA early. Smart kid too. But when he can give you more minutes, what it does is it gives, with DeAndre Hunter too, another guy who's a young guy. These are talking about a lot of young guys here. Hunter last night, I'm adding the minutes up. Wilkins played 25, Salt played 17. So your 2 starters in the post played 42 minutes of the 80 minutes available. Diakite gives you 15. So Hunter played 28. He's giving you starters minutes, and that's a good thing. Virginia fans want to see DeAndre Hunter on the floor as much as possible. He actually played more minutes than either Salt or Wilkins, but he was able to play some of those in the backcourt because, in fact, he came in the game. When he first checked in, he checked in for Jerome, and he checked in before the first media timeout. So this team is more effective when you have, because Hunter and Diakite both are such great athletes. At their size as well. Hunter's 6'7", Diakite is 6'9". They're both great defensive players who can play multiple positions on that. I talked to Hunter after the game last night. He's still young. He's still precocious because I asked him, you're playing a lot more minutes now in the backcourt. For the most part in the ACC season until the last 2 games, Miami game and then this game, he played exclusively at the 4. And so the last couple games he's getting a lot more minutes at the 3. And I said, so what's harder? Playing offense or defense when you have to change back and forth between backcourt and frontcourt in Tony's system. And he said, yeah, right now it's still just playing basketball. So what that told me was, because Tony's systems both are so intricate that he still probably doesn't have the handle on the systems, and he's still playing like DeAndre Hunter. Wait till he figures it out. That's when we probably don't have him for the whole 4 years. I just don't think his talent speaks that he's going to be probably a 2 or 3 year guy. But he's still got room to grow. The answers, I talked to him for a couple minutes about, the different roles he plays. And I just got the sense that, yeah, he's still figuring it all out. He's playing damn good for a guy figuring it all out. So wait till this team is still, they're number one in the country. I really don't think they're at their height yet because Diakite can get on the floor more consistently. I think Hunter can still grow in his role. And I think our guards are really figuring it out. Jerome and Guy and Hall are really figuring out what they need to do back there. And I'd love to see them get a little bit more rest, and maybe that can happen in the next few weeks.
In the post-game interview on the radio side of things, while you're in there interviewing some of the players one-on-one, they're bringing up Mamadi into the booth. And you don't hear too much from Mamadi. And his English is definitely getting better. And they asked him about his English getting better. They asked him about his game getting better. And it was interesting listening to him interview. What an interesting young man. I would love to see some of those interviews that you guys are doing with the players because they all sound like just fascinating young men. And Mamadi's was referencing he's, as much as he's still learning English, and he sounded great. Holy cow. He's still learning that offense, too. He still hasn't fully got a total grasp of it. And these are bright kids, as you said.
Diakite speaks 5 languages, and he's still learning Virginia's system, and he's been in the program 3 years. Yeah, that tells you a lot about the program, yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So then you switch from the radio, and you start to hear the Duke-Louisville game. You start to catch the ACC scores, and it blows you away. And when you wake up in the morning and you shake your head and you go, what? Virginia Tech is now in the 4-seed position? Let's take a look at the ACC as a whole and who's rising, and then later who's falling. Duke now looks like the Duke we expected them to be, and they've been doing it without Bagley, and that gives a great advantage to Krzyzewski and the Blue Devils because they're getting minutes to some kids. They were playing a 6-man rotation in the beginning. Their zone seems to be tightening up. They're starting to get the Duke swagger. They're going to be real trouble. Carolina's acting like a championship team. They're playing with the swagger again. And where the hell did the Hokies come from? I just wish we could have made a couple free throws at the end of that game and beaten them because now I think we have given them the momentum that they've sought, and they played an injured Clemson team on their home floor and beat them impressively. So now it looks like there's a battle for that 4 seed in the ACC. Duke and Carolina have made their moves, and they're firmly entrenched in 2 and 3. How do you foresee the rest of the ACC shaking out these last 3 games? And does Virginia Tech somehow get that coveted double bye?
There are 6 teams competing for that 4 spot, and that's the interesting part. And we can kind of go through quickly maybe each of their remaining games. And I think that's an important thing to do too, because the way the ACC schedules this is actually pretty good. Now Virginia gets, you don't want to overlook anybody. Last night Georgia Tech played well, but you got Georgia Tech, you got Pitt this weekend, you got Louisville next week, you got Notre Dame. So Virginia finishes up. They've already clinched the number 1 seed, and they can kind of coast into Brooklyn. But these are teams who are competing. You've got Virginia Tech, NC State, and Clemson all tied at 9 and 6 for that 4 seed. And then at 8 and 7, you've got you still got 3 teams back there: Florida State, Miami, and who is the other? The Florida State, Miami, and Louisville, all 8 and 7. So there's 6 teams. Syracuse at 7 and 8 may even be. You maybe say 7 teams. They're all within 2 games of each other, but 6 teams within 1 game of each other for 1 spot. Because Duke and Carolina clearly will be the 2 and 3. They're 11 and 4, 11 and 5. They haven't quite clinched it yet, but they're just those 2 teams they're a lap ahead right now on the track. So. Let's look at Clemson first. Clemson is reeling. They've lost 3 straight. They've got so many guys hurt right now. Georgia Tech, Florida State, Syracuse, that's actually pretty favorable. 2 home games, Georgia Tech and Florida State. I like their chances to win a couple of those games. So if you give those guys 2 wins, they're at 11 wins. Virginia Tech's got a tough road. Now, they're 9 and 6. They're hot right now. They've won 4 of their last 5. Their loss was at Duke. They have Duke again at home. They got Louisville at home, Miami on the road. There's a couple tough ones there. If they can go 2 and 1 in that stretch, though, they could also go 1 and 2. Louisville needs a win as well. They're going to get. Those are all 3 NCAA tournament teams. Let's go to NC State. The NC State's come out of nowhere. When I looked last night and saw that they were tied for 4th, how did this happen? So I really have no idea what State's been doing. I haven't really paid attention to them for a while. They've won 3 straight. They've kind of feasted on the sisters of the underbelly. Last couple, they beat Wake Forest and Boston College. They got Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville. That's favorable. The road game of that stretch is Georgia Tech. they could go 2-1. So right now, I don't say there's any advantage between any of those teams that are currently at 9-6. The teams with work to do, Florida State at 8-7, they're at NC State, they're at Clemson, they got Boston College at home. That's pretty tough. You go 3-0 in that stretch, you deserve something.
And you've knocked off the people you need to knock off in front of you.
Knocked off the people. Yeah, Louisville's got Virginia Tech, Virginia, and NC State. That's a tough one. That's a tough stretch.
I think Louisville is toast.
they were 5-1. Yeah, and they've lost 6 of the last 9. Since basically the Virginia game set them on the wrong path. That game last month. The last one to look at will be Miami, who's reeling a bit. They lost twice at home last week to Virginia and Syracuse. They also lost at Boston College. That's 3 in a row. They did beat Notre Dame last night. They finished up with Boston College, North Carolina, Virginia Tech. I mean, I look at that and I say, there are 6 teams within a game of each other. The advantage obviously goes to those teams who are 9-6 right now. I think it's between Virginia Tech and North Carolina State. And if Virginia Tech, obviously, getting back to the Hokies, since especially in our listener audience, we probably have some Hokie fans around. That Duke game, the home game next Monday, you circle that one. They didn't play well in Durham at all. They lost by 22, and the game never felt close, really, to me. If you can beat Louisville and you've still got Miami on the road, that one's one that you'll know by the time you're on the road at Miami on Saturday, the final Saturday of the regular season, what you need to do. If you can upset Duke at home, then you're going to probably be double-buyed into Thursday.
It's a scary thing to think about. I have a feeling they're looking at that schedule. That's got to be one of the toughest roads, along with Louisville's, to make any headway or keep your positioning. But they've stamped their ticket to the dance. I mean, they could lose all 3 of those, and you would think that they would still have enough quality wins and a record that they could make the NCAA tournament. Yeah,
at this stage, it's hard to look at a team that's currently, with only a week and a half left in the regular season, tied for 4th in the ACC, and say, not sure about your credentials for the NCAA tournament. The thing that really hurts them, and actually it hurts them and NC State both. Now, and they're both tied for 4th. This is the interesting thing about this, is their RPI ranking. Now, I know that there are more factors than just RPI, but RPI for those two, they were actually the two of the NCAA tournament type teams. Well, Virginia Tech jumped up a little bit. NC State is actually among the teams that we expect to go to the tournament. They're 10th in the ACC with a 55 RPI. Virginia Tech's at 45, Louisville's at 52, and they're reeling, as we talked about. But that a 45 RPI, when you're talking about at-large bids, there's 34 at-large bids. And that doesn't quite compute that if you're 45th, you're 11 out. But it just means that your resume is not complete yet. And so they've got work to do, and that's another reason. I mean, okay, the double buy in ACC and all this is great. I mean, for program prestige, getting your first double buy would be incredible for Virginia Tech. But that win over Duke is even more important because it'd be a win over Duke. Yeah. And that would be a huge resume builder for them.
And it's sort of, even though we look back now at UVA and the win over Duke is just one of a slew of important victories in their journey to lock in this number 1 seed. Duke is, I don't know, Duke is for anybody is a great, not just for your resume for the tournament, but it really gives you some momentum. And it feels like Virginia is on the downward slope of their schedule. And we've done the battling and the fighting. We can rest. And I don't know, is it better to be one of these teams like the NC States, Miami's, Virginia Techs are going to have to be fighting, and they're going to be battle tested and pushing, and we're going to be in a little bit of rest mode when we get in the ACC tournament? I mean, these kids haven't seemed like they know how to turn the light switch on when they need to. But is there any concern about them going to the ACC tournament that they're not going to be as tested as the rest of their brethren?
This is the classic debate we always have about in baseball. I mentioned Jeff's a Red Sox fan, I'm a Nats fan. Nats the last couple in the National League East, there's no competition. The last couple of years they've
20 games.
Yeah, they clinched the division September 1st, and so you're able to get everything in line, your pitching staff, everything else. But so the question is, would you rather be playing the last day of the regular season in baseball, and same thing here in basketball? Are you battle tested enough, or have you taken too much time off, and then you have to turn it back on? Is that hard to do? I mean, I think from Virginia's standpoint, and I'll use the 2014-2015 Virginia season as an example. That team started 28-1. Now they were 19-1 when Justin Anderson broke his pinky, and that threw that whole season off. They still won 9 straight after he broke his pinky, but they really had to work. They were one less guys in their rotation. They worked their butt off to win those 9 games. Got to 28-1. They lost, if you remember, that last second loss at Louisville. So they're 28-2. That was the last game of the regular season. They go down to the ACC tournament. They win in the first game. I think they beat Florida State. They lost to Carolina in the semifinals. So they're 29-3, but all of a sudden you've lost a couple games. And to me, having covered that team, 40 minutes a night for how many ever nights that was, I thought they lost their legs maybe somewhere around game 27 or 28, and kind of were running on fumes. And they thought that maybe Justin coming back would give them, because he did come back, and they thought maybe that would give them a push, and it didn't, because it turned out he was rusty. And that's, you can talk about Marvin Bagley in the same context. Bagley's missed 4 games. Who knows when he might come back. You just can't integrate a new guy into something, and you can't also play yourself out in February. So I think, honestly, what happened with Tony and the loss to Virginia Tech, explaining it even further, I think, that was a stretch of games. That was the Miami game was the one after that. Virginia was about to play its 6th road game out of 9. The Virginia Tech game was a home game, but a 9-game stretch was 6 road games. Pretty much all NCAA tournament teams except for Wake Forest, because they've got Georgia Tech and Pitt this week. So, no easy games in that stretch. And Tony was just trying to get to the end of that. They had that 8-day window with the break, and he thought he could ride the horses a little longer. He didn't ride them, so it didn't work out in the Virginia Tech game. They lost their legs and lost that game by 1 point. I think he used that 8-day break, and I was hopeful that last night he would do what he did, which is use the bench more. I hope that the Pitt game on Saturday, I hope that the Louisville game on the road, you certainly, Louisville's going to need a win there. They're going to play their butts off, and that's going to be a tough game. The Notre Dame game at home, finishing up the regular season in a week and a half from now, maybe that one will be another one where you can get some guys some more minutes off the bench. I think when it comes down to it, I think you want to have legs, especially with Virginia, the way they play. Games are 60 possessions each team. It's not up and down the floor like a Duke game that has 75 possessions each team, but also those 60 possessions on each side, 120 possessions total. You're playing maximum effort for 30 seconds each time. So it's not like other teams. You're not sitting back in a 2-3 zone. You can't stand in a corner and let the offense run over here for a while for a couple plays and take some time off. So Virginia, I think, they that 8-day break, and I think hopefully, if they turn it back on in the ACC tournament, great. I'm a fan as well as a journalist, and you and I have covered ACC tournaments together in person before. You sat on the floor for the 2016 final, a great game, a 2-point loss to North Carolina. You want to win every game you go out there and play, but the important games are the ones of the week after. And so, every game for Virginia, they're fortunate now. It hadn't been that long, honestly, Jeff, 6 years ago, that we would sit and look at Joe Lunardi's bracketology for whether or not we got in the tournament. Now we're debating, will we be the number 1 overall national seed? So at this stage, these games are just tune-ups. Don't get anybody hurt. Let's get some guys some minutes. Let's get shooting strokes back on. Let's make sure our defense is all figured out. And then on Thursday, March 15th, let's go out and start winning some games.
I got the Rocky theme song in my head again, Chris. I appreciate it. Hard pivot. WWE.
That's a hard pivot. Yeah.
Gronk. They're talking to Gronk. I'm a Falcons fan, but I'm also a Patriots fan, which made life interesting. Super Bowl before last. Uh-huh. You get worried when you see that headline come across, because you're thinking, is Gronk going to actually, it makes sense for Gronk. The Patriots, they've been spoiled with Gronk and Brady and Belichick. If I hear the WWE is calling Gronk, and if I was Gronk thinking I can make the same amount of money with that much less work and pain to my body. Now, there's still a whole lot of pain that's got to go through, but at least it's controlled in a way. Is there any legitimacy to the Gronk to the WWE rumors? And how would you use Gronk if you had him all of a sudden in your talent pool?
I think it's, from what I've been reading, Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer writer, he's wrestling's preeminent journalist, 40 years. What he's saying that he's hearing from his sources in WWE and elsewhere is that Gronk actually wants them more than they want him. Not to say they don't want him. If he retires from football, Clearly, WWE would love to have Gronkowski. Probably not to be a touring guy who works 250 days a year like their main roster guys do. Probably more as an attraction who may work a few of those select events a year like the WrestleManias and SummerSlams, Royal Rumbles and that kind of thing. And then some things in between, maybe like a Brock Lesnar type schedule. But, the thing is right now there are people in WWE who think that Gronkowski is sort of using WWE as a wedge to get more money out of the Patriots. Basically, hey, I'm, 29 years old. I've been getting injured a lot lately. Guys go for my knees because I'm so big they can't bring me down, so I'm a target, and, got some head issues lately. So I could be on the tail end of a great career, still make great money. He's a, 8-figure guy in the NFL. He's a 10 million plus guy in the NFL. WWE's not going to pay him $10 million. The money's not there. They don't pay Brock Lesnar. They don't pay Brock Lesnar or John Cena $10 million. So if he thinks he's going to get outbid by WWE for his services, he's crazy. That said, again, if he retires, if he just doesn't want to play football anymore, and then okay, you're done, you're retired, you want to do some things, kind of like Ronda Rousey. You want to do some things. You want to do your Brian Bosworth type action movies from the Brian Bosworth that does in the 90s after he retired from the NFL. You want to do that stuff, and then you want to fit in some WWE in between. We're there for you. We'd love to have you as a special attraction. But here's another thing. He's a great athlete, but he's going to have to train. And it's not just that you go in and you're Gronkowski and you're a big, strong guy, and then you automatically know to do those moves. I could give the example of Kurt Angle, one of the greats in WWE history, who won an Olympic gold medal in wrestling. After he retired as an amateur wrestler, his gold medal career over, he goes to the training center at WWE. First day of training, by lunchtime, he wants to quit because it was too hard. This dude won an Olympic gold medal with a broken neck, and the training was too hard for him. So it's not just that you go in and become a star. You don't just grab a microphone and start talking trash. Gronkowski's got the character down.
He does.
He's got to get the stuff.
Not
in
even
the
a
ring
character.
Yeah, he's just Gronk. He's already, the character's already built. But yeah, so it's not a slam dunk that he would automatically go to the top of the WWE. I think again he's probably more an attraction. And as an attraction, he's not worth anywhere close to what he's getting paid in the NFL right now. So if he's thinking that this is going to, give him a career alternative to the NFL that makes the same amount of money, he's crazy.
Elimination Chamber coming up this weekend with ramifications for WrestleMania. All the storylines now are starting to point to WrestleMania with each of the pay-per-views. Are there any storylines that are really interesting to you as they position themselves for the big show?
This Elimination Chamber interests me. I think it's clear that Roman Reigns probably is the guy. It looked like that would have been the case at Royal Rumble, but then, if only I'd looked down the line and seen that this Elimination Chamber was being booked to be a feeder to WrestleMania, you would have known that, because it's a Raw event. In the future, actually, I'll interject quickly that WWE is getting away from the show branded pay-per-views after WrestleMania. So starting in May, they're going back to dual brand pay-per-views. So both SmackDown and Raw wrestlers will be on each pay-per-view. So you won't be able to look at Elimination Chamber and say, well, that's a Raw pay-per-view, so they're probably going to do something with that leads to WrestleMania. Won't be able to do that in the future. But that said, it looks like Reigns is the guy. They have 7 men in the match, which is interesting. I think what they probably do with the match, as predictable as the outcome seems to be with Reigns winning, the other guys in the match can set up their WrestleMania matches that night as well in that Elimination Chamber. It looks like, maybe Seth Rollins and Finn Balor end up being, I call them dance partners. They're going to be guys who are going to have a story going into WrestleMania. It would seem like Elias and John Cena have been paired off a good bit lately. Elias has come out of nowhere, literally nowhere, and he's one of the top guys right now. In NXT, he was a forgotten man. He got brought up to the main roster because they had nothing for him to do in NXT. Now he gets the biggest pop of the night on Raw every Monday night. So I think putting him alongside Cena would elevate the hell out of him, and that'd be a great. If you think now that because athletically he looks the part, he can wrestle well, but he just wasn't getting any resonance with fans. If you really want to take him to the next level, have him with Cena at WrestleMania. That's a damn good match. And so I think you're going to see some of those storylines come out of Fastlane. Excuse me, out of Elimination Chamber. Fastlane is the SmackDown one coming up in a couple weeks. But yeah, these next two will establish those battle lines. And funny to me is that usually by now we sort of already know where things are going. Maybe it's good for fans. I mean, it's good for me. I don't know where things are going yet, and it's already February 22nd as we're talking right now. WrestleMania is only 6 weeks away, and we still don't know what the stories are. So that's good, because what that means is we still have to watch.
What is on deck for Augusta Free Press? You've got the pit game coming up this weekend. I'm sure you started to get your tickets for New York for the ACC tournament, and you'll start to build some content on the site related to that. What can the fans of the AFP expect in the next coming days and week? Well,
and I should point out too, we talked last week on our podcast about the book I had coming up, The Worst Wrestling Pay-Per-View Ever. It's actually published on the website. We just decided, we could make it available for sale as an ebook through Amazon. It was probably the size of the book's about 100 pages, so the recommended sale price for that would be around $5.99. I'd make about $2 off that if after Amazon took its 60% cut. So I just put it out there for free. So it's available on the website for free. You can go to the front page of the website, or any story on the website, actually. There's a link at the bottom of every story, a big graphic that says, Worst Wrestling Pay-Per-View Ever by Chris Graham. It's a book cover, the effective book cover. And you can read all 12 chapters. I've already gotten several people read it. I've gotten feedback. People read it in one night. It's 100 pages, but apparently it's a gripping tale. So we kind of went over some of the details last week on our podcast, but it's out there now. So
I'm gonna have to print it, because I did the last ball at U-Haul, which was a great read. I'll tell you, you don't have to print it. Crystal read it on her phone, because Crystal, my wife, had not read it. So she literally sat down and we made it easy. We put little tabs on the bottom of each. After you got to the bottom of the chapter, it's essentially each chapter is published in a separate file. So you can read it. You can sit there and read it on your phone. Make it easy for you. As a traditional book guy, it just feels wrong to read any. I'm not a Kindle guy.
Not a Kindle guy. Okay.
I've never done any of that stuff. I might just actually, kill a tree, print that thing out, sit it in front of my can.
We won't question it from there. That's right.
Yeah, we'll just go from there. It's a beautiful
So that's
thing.
available on the site. And that's a neat thing. I mean, the book's been sitting there for a few months. We just decided to push the button and make it go. Yeah, the ACC tournament, I'm looking forward to it. It's a week and a half away. We're leaving on Tuesday morning. We'll miss probably the first game because there's 14 games in 5 days. 3 on Tuesday, 4 on Wednesday, 4 on Thursday, 2 Friday, 1 Saturday. So we're getting on the train about 9 o'clock. We'll be in New York around 3, so we'll probably miss the first 2 games. We'll see the night game that night. But I'm already thinking ahead. I mean, Jeff, you've been with me to cover these things, sitting courtside watching ACC. You get access to every team for the week until they lose. You get access to every team. We get to interview players and coaches, and the hard part is just not trying to do it all, because it's 14 games with 15 ACC teams, 10 of whom are going to be in the NCAA tournament, 1 or 2 or 3 of whom are going to be in the Final Four probably. So I got to remember to pace myself, but it's hard to do because you went with me, and I don't think we paced ourselves.
No, it was exhausting and awesome. It was, and that may be next Thursdays, just because the following Thursday you're going to be on the train, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we may have to do some behind-the-scenes stories.
Oh, we got a lot of them, don't we? Yeah. I'm amazed we still have a pass after a couple of stories.
We'll share. There's a teaser for the security moving me not once but twice. In the 2013.
Surprised ESPN still talks to me.
Yeah. So, stories for next Thursday with Street Knowledge for all of your UVA stories, and for your great wrestling ebook. Visit the Augusta Free Press. For Chris Graham, I am Jeff Fife, and have a great week.